Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Is the second part of our story richer? We'll find out today. Enjoy the show! You are listening to the second part of the story. You can listen to the first part in the previous video or by following the link in the description under this video. Happy listening. Eventually, Michelle moved out of his parents' place and into Jason's spare room. He needed to be closer to work, and his parents lived too far away. His mom and dad, especially Jean, pestered him to try to mend his relationship with Hope, to make every effort to get her to change her mind rather than simply giving in to her demands. They made no secret of their disappointment, but his mother believed that Hope was simply afraid of the wedding, as if it were a weight that would soon be attached to her leg, holding her in place and pulling her back. Fear of such a long-term commitment was not unusual, although her way of coping with it was unusual and self-destructive. But Michelle did not heed the pleas of his parents. He knew that deep down, it was not out of fear but out of lust. Everything had to take its course, for better or worse. Michelle and Hope continued to talk on the phone every Monday at 8 o'clock, even if she didn't feel well or was depressed, or had other thoughts running through her head. She still made sure she was at home, alone, and ready. She always called, he never did. Their conversations started out tentative and terse, but over time they opened up, closer to what they had been before but never reaching that level of intimacy and warmth. Michelle immediately demanded that if they had to talk, all talk about their dating and nightlife was prohibited. He didn't want to hear about who she was sleeping with, not even that it was happening, which he was sure of. For her part, she was grateful she could not hear about his bed partners, despite the fact that it all started with her actions, her desires, and that she herself insisted that he do the same. When the realization dawned that the man she loved was most likely getting pleasure from other women, Hope grimaced, felt sick, and sad. But this was what she wanted. These thoughts and realizations scared her. Their separation had already lasted 6 months. Hope had a constant string of lovers. With the help of her friends, she tried not to dwell on any of them. They were afraid that the emergence of intimacy would undermine the ultimate goal, to return to Michelle and become his wife. After 2 more dates, Orlando moved on with other women, and she was with 9 other men, having an intim at least 2 to 3 times a week. Some were good, some were disappointing and discarded after one night. One was exceptional, his name was Ty. Michelle, as Jean had feared, became a central figure in their school's hunger frenzy. Affairs or casual relationships were not uncommon, even among married or committed employees. But when Michelle suddenly returned to the market, the very eligible bachelor was back in the spotlight. He dated a lot of people, and if rumors are to be believed, slept with a lot of them. But he still slipped away, and no one could hold him. If Hope had thrown him away, there were many who were ready to catch him. "Our wedding was supposed to take place in 3 weeks, Hope said wistfully on Monday night during their weekly conversation. They had been talking for about an hour while she stared intently at the calendar on the wall, where the date was clearly outlined in bright rings and hearts. She shed tears, something she hadn't done for a long time. "Michelle, I want to stop this madness. I want us to come back. Please come back to me. I hate this." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a sharp intake of breath, and she regretted mentioning the wedding in her desire to have him back in her life. She didn't want to put pressure on him. After a moment of introspection, she felt like she'd already made enough of this earlier in the year, when her thirst for other experiences had sent them into this spiral of self-pity and loneliness. The line went dead. Crap, her scream was loud and sudden, so much so that she shocked herself. Moreover, when she discovered that tears were not just welling up in the corners of her eyes but were flowing freely, pouring uncontrollably down her cheeks and falling onto the bed, suddenly the pain returned to the same level as when they first separated, burning deep inside her. She was in pain, in pain. She did what she had sworn she would never do. She called on the phone that evening with Michelle, since he agreed to talk to her. Mondays had become sacred. They were just for the two of them to stay close, to have something to hold on to. Hope always gently refused everyone who asked her for companionship on these evenings. But now, destitute, feeling despised, and unloved, she needed something. She needed to forget about her pain. She needed. "Hey, baby," he answered on the second ring. Something happened. I thought you weren't available on Mondays. What is it? An evening with your ex? It hurt. She never called Michelle her ex, but spoke about it, albeit briefly. She was always truthful with those she was with, warning them that there was no long-term relationship and that her heart still belonged to Michelle. She fully intended to return to him and be faithful again. When they met again at the cafe on Brown Street, "I need you, Ty. I need you to pound me into the mattress until I pass out." There was desperation and despondency in her plea, but nevertheless, she tried to sound hot. Ty did not notice the sadness in her voice, but heard only what he wanted to hear. And having heard, how could he refuse? He was there in record time. He was the only one she had ever brought here, the only one with whom she had ever desecrated Michelle's bed. He had been there many times, but today she would be with him for the first time on Monday, Michelle's evening. When she opened the door and stood before him, he licked his lips, devouring her with his eyes. Ty stepped back to look, marveling at what a beautiful, attractive, and seductive creature she was. Her body without clothes was framed by the light from inside as well as the light from the front door. He pounced on her, picked her up in his arms, and carried her into the bedroom. Moving around the apartment, he began to shower her face, neck, and lips with passionate kisses. He became aroused with passion. He knew that he had fallen in love with this woman and was already planning how to make her forget Michelle. He wanted her for himself. Ty pushed her roughly onto the bed, holding her with a dominant force that he soon learned she responded well to, and had an intim with her in a fit of passion. She shouted, "Ty, I am only yours, and I belong to you." Her voice was loud and clear, full of passion and desire, full of unbridled lust. And Michelle, walking through the front door, hoping to leave all this madness behind, as Hope had begged him to earlier in the evening, heard it clearly. Michelle held the wedding ring in his hand, wanting to put it on her finger again, to correct their failures, to win back her love and her hand. But now, he felt the long-forgotten dagger piercing him again, deeper than ever. His blade glowed with heat. She called him, asked him to become hers again, to end the separation and restore their love. But it was all a lie. She didn't want him at all. He heard her sound, a deep guttural sound, followed by the rhythmic slapping of two bodies without clothes. Soon, a deep male voice responded to her sound, growling, extolling the pleasure of the flesh. The two voices echoed each other, blow after blow, as the spanking intensified. Michelle stood motionless, listening, and everything inside him was twisted into a knot. All lies. He tore out the page from the notebook where he had written the date and time many months ago and wrote a new note for her. "I thought you wanted me back to mend our relationship. I was wrong. You lied. I guess I'm an idiot, and you're A. Here's your wedding ring. I don't need it anymore. Maybe you'll wear it for Ty and his huge thing between your legs, since you're all his." Michelle didn't sign. There was no need to. She would already understand who it was from. He placed the note and ring on the kitchen bench where she was sure to see them and then left with a heavy heart. He left without shedding a tear. I told myself that there would be no more tears. Not for her, not in this life. He finally heard her scream when the door closed behind him. When he left the school and headed to his car in the teacher parking lot, Ella was waiting for him. She was sitting on the hood of his Hyundai i30. When he saw her and froze, a little over 3 weeks had passed since that fateful evening when he returned to the apartment and found Hope and Ty there. He stopped communicating with her again, blocked her number, and threatened to sue if she continued to harass him. The threat was unfounded, but he hoped that she would not find out about it. "You're in 5th place, Michelle," Ella shouted at him. "This woman loves you." "Shut up, Ella. That's it between me and Hope. Everything is over." "There is no turning back," he replied. When he returned to Jason that evening, he was in terrible pain. But he held it in. No matter how painful it was to hide grief within himself, he did not let it out, did not allow it to consume him. Jason saw right through him. Over these months, their friendship grew from good friends to great ones, and from excellent ones to the best. Michelle relied on Jason, leaned on him, and Jason helped him whenever and wherever he could. "I told you not to go," Jason said when Michelle returned, depressed, and told the story about Hope and her lover. "But you didn't listen. This is how it always ends," jealousy, rage, a terrible feeling of inadequacy. In an open relationship, someone always suffers. People claim that this is not so, but deep down, it is true. When the person you love wants intimacy with others rather than with you and gets more pleasure from intimacy with them, it is impossible to avoid pain. You have to be less than human not to be affected by this. You had a plan for 12 months, you had to stick to it. Now, Lila is here to reprimand him and provoke him into a quarrel at his workplace. I won't go back to her. She's devastated. She didn't know you were going there, otherwise, she would never have invited that idiot. She hasn't seen him since then. She hasn't seen anyone since then. She begged for her friend, but the words were not heard. You knew there would be intimate with others during your breakup, Michelle. You can't be upset that you stumbled upon this. You came there without warning, he snorted. You can't just walk into someone's house and expect her to sit there like a polite little slave and wait for you. You had to. This is still my apartment, Lila. My name is still on the lease. I had every right to go in there. Not to mention that less than an hour before, she was begging me to come back, and I went because I was weak and stupid. He opened the door and placed his laptop and book bag on the passenger seat. This will not happen again. Leave. She needs you. It was a mistake. She thought you. He interrupted her again, anger rising in his voice. It doesn't matter what she thought. I don't care anymore. Now, please leave me alone. I have a date today, and I don't want it to be ruined by thoughts of this. Lila slid off the hood of his car and approached him, wanting a friendly and heartfelt hug, but he pulled away. Please don't touch me, Lila. Just go away. His attitude shouldn't have shocked Lila, but she couldn't help it. A small sigh escaped her lips as she tried to speak without the burden of emotion. You could have a date with Hope. She wants you back. She needs you. She almost never stops crying when she realized that you were there, that you saw them together. She was completely heartbroken. Please, Michelle, don't give up on her. You're better than this. I said no, Lila. Not now, not ever. His hands trembled, although his voice was firm and adamant. His words and his body emphasized different emotions, and this did not go unnoticed by Lila. He slid into the driver's seat and slammed the door. Lila yelled something at him, but he ignored it, started the car, and pulled out of the parking lot away from her, taking long, slow, deep breaths. He needed to calm down, to regain control over himself. It's true. He had a date with a nicely blonde nurse named Meredith. He met her 2 months after the first separation and met her several times. He also managed to sleep with her twice. But now that the door to his relationship with Hope was carefully closed, locked, and nailed to the frame, he decided to do something more serious with her again. His 12-month plan was in effect. Maybe she'll wear her work uniform, he thought to himself, turning his frown into a smile as he drove. The anticipation of the evening made him more excited and nervous than he had been in a long time. Lila took out her phone and called Hope, watching Michelle disappear into the distance. There's still a chance, although he doesn't want to admit it. It hurts. It hurts terribly. She heard soft crying on the other end of the line, but no more words were spoken before she hung up. Hope's friends continued to stalk Michelle at least a couple of times a week. This was something he knew all too well. He had seen them many times. They were not good at their maneuvers, so he stayed in his office later and later, worked at school until dusk, or left early to avoid those waiting for him or watching him. He often noticed that someone followed him on dates or even followed him when he was just meeting with friends. It was becoming unbearable and unacceptable. It was now early April, and the date when the two former lovers were to meet at a cafe on Brown Street was just over a month away. After he came to Hope with Ty, he completely stopped all communication with her again. All calls were immediately disconnected, whether from her or from one of her accomplices. With more and more numbers constantly being blocked, he had new email addresses that he used exclusively for communication, only occasionally checking the old ones. And he unfriended or blocked all the culprits on his social networks. In fact, he went so far as to disassociate himself from Facebook and Instagram almost entirely and kept in touch with his friends through other, more private channels. Michelle also removed himself from the lease, much to his chagrin and trauma. He had made a mistake earlier by staying, but he decided to leave it at that, hoping that he could come back. Now it no longer seemed possible or plausible. Finally, the weak link was his mother, Jean. "Hi, Mom," he answered when she called him one evening. "How are you?" "Please don't hang up, Michelle," it was Hope's voice. Gritting his teeth, he held back his verbal tirade but said nothing. A moment passed, then another. Hope spoke again. "I just want to ask you a question." She paused, waiting. Still no answer. "Michelle, are you still here?" He chuckled. "Michelle, I just need to know. I just need to know if you're still going to meet me next month, that's all," Hope desperately begged, pleaded with the man she still loved and who she hoped still loved her. "Will you be there at noon?" She heard a sigh, deep, full of humility and regret. "Please, Michelle, I miss you. I miss us. I need you to be with me again, yes," one word before he ended the conversation. But his head was spinning from the insinuations and impudence of her contact, from the fact that she had the right to do so. What angered him most was where it came from. He immediately called his father. There was only one dial tone before the phone was picked up. "Hello, Michelle," his father Francois replied with a hint of caution. "I know you're upset, but your mother, he stopped there. I asked you and your mother not to interfere, and now she is calling from her mom's phone." Michelle barked into the phone, furious. "Son, she is here now with us." Francois's voice fell to a barely audible whisper but remained alarming, though it was filled with warmth and love. "She's been coming here for several weeks. I know we promised not to interfere when you two postponed your wedding, but she's afraid, son, afraid that you won't want her to come back. She is unhappy, lonely, and afraid. She hasn't dated anyone for a long time." "What if I don't want her back?" Michelle demanded. "What if I've already changed my mind? What if I don't think I can trust her? Moreover, I know that I can't trust her." "You have no right." He then heard her talking to his mother in the background before the voices suddenly stopped, and one of them said faintly, questioningly, "Michelle? Michelle? I know you're hurting, but don't let your pride get in the way of your happiness. Until all this happened, you were the happiest I've ever seen you, and Hope. We all know you're meant to be together. You both spent some time apart, and you both hurt each other, but now it's time for it all." He could do was disconnect from his father and then began to block the numbers of both parents. "Crap," he shouted. He can't trust anyone. When he finally returned to Jason, his friend was waiting with a cold beer and a smirk on his face. Mikkel almost threw his bags across the room. He was still on edge, tense, and ready to explode. He didn't even say a word to Jason as he snatched the beer from him and began downing it into himself. It slightly burned his throat with a bitter taste and cooled him perfectly. He threw the bottle into the trash, and Jason handed him another, which suffered the same fate. "Your mother called here," Michelle grinned, going in search of the third bottle. "I understand everything, but don't let it upset you. You're happy, aren't you, with a plan, with your successes, and that old life? It is finished and buried. Do what you need, what you want. Don't let it knock you down." Jason patted him on the back, both to comfort him and to gently remind him that everything was going as Michelle had always expected all those months ago. "If you are so upset now, then why all the previous pain?" Michelle nodded. "I'm not upset because Hope is sleeping with someone, not anymore. It's about the boundaries she crosses, my parents, my job, my friends, my dates. She continues to disrespect me at every turn. I asked her to respect my wishes for 12 months, only 12 months this time." He sipped his beer slowly, and a smile spread across his face, "But I'm happy. Really happy. I'm happy that I have a great job, good friends, and hopefully a beautiful, loving girl waiting for me at the end. I'm happy that this will all end soon, and I can face my future. Do you want to go somewhere? The guys can meet us at Corona." Jason loved the Crown and Squire, a local pub that was a short walk from his apartment. "Sounds great. Let me finish this first," he laughed, taking another sip of his third beer in the last 10 minutes. "There will likely be a live band playing at the Crown tonight to complement the overpriced glasses of beer, but if his friends were there and it was Friday evening, then why not? Tomorrow, he could sleep all day with a hangover, and no one would care. He finished his drink and changed into jeans, a midnight oil t-shirt, and casual shoes as Jason continued to ramble on about his new girlfriend. Ever since his relationship with Stacy failed disastrously, Jason has wanted nothing more than casual hookups for easy companionship and hardcore night. Jason had been badly burned and was now happily jumping from bed to bed. He never stayed with any woman for more than 3 months, but he was always honest with his new partners that he was not looking for long-term commitment. His relationship with Heidi was new, in its second week, and he was clearly still in the stage of wanting to see her and be with her, even though Michelle knew that he would soon leave her like everyone else. The walk to the Crown took about 10 minutes, and they passed by a local diner, the Greasy Spoon. Since Michelle hadn't eaten yet and had already drunk 3 bottles of beer, Jason pushed him inside before the difficult night ahead. It would not hurt to refresh yourself. 2 Chico rolls, 2 battered fish, and 4 buckets of potatoes. Thank you. Jason handed the order to the daughter of the Vietnamese couple who ran the place and handed over a $20 bill. Keep the change and buy something tasty. She was young, about 14 or 15, incredibly thin bordering on anorexic, and a real talker. However, she spoke English well, something her parents struggled with, so most evenings it was she who took orders and translated for her workaholic parents. Jason and Michelle felt sorry for her because at such a tender age she always worked long hours. In addition, Michelle, as a teacher, feared for her education. Her workday left little time for studying and grades. Michelle, the girl turned to him, last evening, this woman was here again. Michelle felt the blood in his veins turn to ice. She asked how often you come here and when you usually go to the pub. He sighed and sat down heavily on one of the flimsy-looking but surprisingly durable white plastic chairs that lined the wall. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. Why can't they leave me alone? Most likely, this woman is Trisha. She lives nearby, and it won't take long for her to get here. She has appeared in the Crown on more than one occasion and appears to be keeping an eye on the fish and chip joint. Maybe, he thought, stopping all communication was a mistake. Perhaps if I had continued communicating, it would have stopped the stalking and harassment. Don't let it get to you, buddy. Jason shoved the paper-wrapped food into Michelle's hands. It's almost over, and then you can return to life, right? Michelle wasn't so sure and only made a sound that sounded like a grunt and a sigh. This 12-month period was your idea, remember, Michelle? And in any case, no matter how things turn out, you've been posting that hot nurse for a long time. Not to mention that administrator from your school, she's okay. What about that young gym teacher? Well, that one, PHW, Michelle didn't seem convinced, so Jason continued, you and Hope, well, I know it wasn't a happy voyage. She has boys, and you have girls. Take this as a victory. Don't worry about any of that nonsense, they just get desperate. You have another month to decide what you will do, whether you will stay with Hope or move on. In any case, trust yourself and don't pay attention to them. Jason took a bite of one of the Chico rolls. The large, greasy, deep-fried spring roll-like snack had already rendered the waxed paper bag partially transparent. Oh, damn, he exclaimed, damn hot. He waved his hand in front of his mouth as if that would magically extinguish the fire inside, leaving Michelle laughing uproariously from behind the counter. The girl and her mother also joined in laughing at Jason. It took them about 15 minutes to eat their portions of fat, butter, salt, and lots of carbohydrates, during which Jason talked at length about Heidi. I think she might be the one. Jason had a dreamy look on his face. He hadn't been this excited and optimistic about a woman since Penny arrived 5 months ago. She lasted a full 6 weeks before Jason decided one morning that he didn't like the way she snored. The irony of this fact made Michelle grimace. Jason snored like a rusty robot juggling poorly tuned chainsaws. It was so loud that it could easily be heard from the other room and through the 2 closed doors. I think I want to be exclusive with Michelle. I want to have a real relationship with her. He looked at Michelle, who was busy stuffing the last of the chips into his mouth, and grinned. Is it inappropriate to propose after just 2 weeks? Michelle nearly choked on his chips, causing Jason to laugh. I'm kidding, Michelle. The immediate response was FW, and Jason continued, I'm going to wait until at least 3 weeks. He playfully hit Michelle on the bicep. Come on, Casanova, perhaps there will be another girl in the Crown who wants to get you. Jason laughed at his friend. let's find you a few more before you get called back from vacation." Michelle gave him a light smack back, and they walked towards the pub, towards drinks, and perhaps something more exotic that evening. The group Shadow Boxer actually performed at the Crown. They were a cover band of the Angels but also performed many songs by other famous Australian artists. Their performance of Am I Ever Gonna See Your Face Again in particular drew raucous support from the growing crowd, as is always the case with this song, and Michelle found himself shouting the unofficial additional lyrics of the song at the top of his voice along with everyone present. "Will I ever see your face again?" the singer asked enthusiastically, repeating the lyrics of the late, great Doc Neeson. "No way, get, expletive, ed, expletive, off," the crowd shouted back. This altercation continued again and again. In a way, it was cathartic. The lyrics of the song were mournful about lost love, but the crowd was responding on behalf of the one who had left, and Michelle felt it. Felt the words resonate deep within him. Who is he going to be? For those who are sad and left alone? Or for those who have run away? As the final notes sounded and the crowd began to applaud, Michelle felt someone grab him from behind and pull him into an uninvited embrace. Weak, gentle arms grabbed him, and soft breasts pushed into his back. He froze, contemplating the worst possible scenario. A side glance at one of his friends, Chaz, told him things were bad. "Hope," he began as she turned him around, but it wasn't Hope. Instead, he looked at Trisha's beautiful face. Her blonde hair was combed back, and she was wearing an old and faded AC/DC t-shirt under a men's red and black plaid flannel shirt, which she wore unbuttoned but tied at the waist. As a result, her large, soft breasts bulged out even more. Excruciatingly tight jeans and knee-high FMS boots completed her pub outfit. Now she moved him to arm's length, hugging him more restrainedly and appropriately. "You have a good voice for a drunk, Michelle," she said coyly, with a smirk on her lips. "Won't you dance with me?" She saw his hesitation almost before he felt it. "I won't talk about Hope, I promise. I just want to dance. I may be Hope's friend, but I still like to think that I'm your friend too. I just saw you here, and in times past, you would have danced with me." It was true, Hope didn't like to dance, but Trisha liked it, and often he would accompany her to the dance floor if she was with the boys. But now he just looked at her, not knowing what to answer. However, Trisha did not wait for an answer and took his absence as tacit consent. It didn't matter, though, she wasn't going to take no for an answer anyway. As soon as the group started the next song, a driving and fiery cover of the Poor's hit, "More Wine Please, Waiter," she dragged him to the small and cramped dance floor. Trisha gently wrapped her arms around his waist and began shaking him back and forth, tossing her hair in time to the pounding riff. Michelle went with the flow, still shocked and more than a little worried about what was happening. Trisha exuded intimate appeal while maintaining an elegant and natural charm. When one song ended, he found himself staying for more. Her smile grew, as did her excitement, but deep down, he knew it was wrong. This was clearly just another reconnaissance mission, and he was beginning to get annoyed at the recklessness of her actions. Finally, he pushed her away and turned to his friends, but she grabbed his arm, holding him with all her might. "Michelle, please," he easily removed her hands, shaking his head as he did so. "It's time for you all to stop following me. The more you do this, the less I want to date Hope. You achieve the exact opposite of what you want." She pressed herself against him, screaming, "What?" as the band started a new song, and it became almost impossible to hear each other. Michelle sighed and invited Trisha to follow him outside. He needed to talk about this, needed to get her and the others to leave him. Their constant interference in his life was unacceptable. He came here with his friends to have fun, relax, and not think about anything in particular, and he definitely didn't want to relive the painful memories and broken heart. Trisha nodded in response to his gesture and, again grabbing his hand, followed him to the exit. As they passed Jason, he smiled knowingly and winked, earning an angry look from Michelle. "Trisha, this is not good," he scolded the woman as they stood at the entrance to the Crown. The sound of the band was still heard inside, but it was no longer inaudible. "I agree, Michelle," it shocked him. He didn't expect her to respond in such a way that she would agree with him so easily. He was confused and very embarrassed. "Then what's your game, Trisha? What are you doing here?" She shrugged, making her breasts bounce in the clear light and without the crush of the crowd inside. Her breasts caught Michelle's eye, and he realized that they were most likely not wearing a bra. The thought made him shudder. "What are you doing?" "I'm not playing, Michelle. I'm bored and lonely, so I came here to drink, dance, and maybe try my luck. Then I saw you. I missed you, you know? We all missed you. We were once friends." She had a sad expression on her face, like someone resigned to an impending death or a departure that could not be prevented. "I know you don't want to talk about it, so I won't. But can't we be friends, at least for this evening? Just the two of us, just friends." There were tears in her eyes. Michelle had always liked Trisha, and not only because she was one of the closest friends of the woman he loved. She was sincere. He had protected her for so long. She had so many bad experiences with boyfriends and lovers. She had a habit of hanging out with jerks and losers, and he took her pain and loneliness like a bitter pill. He wanted her to be happy as he was or as he was friends. He said finally, "For today, Michelle," extending his hand to shake it, formalizing their truce. However, Trisha hugged him tightly, digging into his body and whispering again and again, "Thank you." The hug lasted a long time, maybe several minutes, maybe longer than it should have been, longer than hugs between friends. She buried her face in his neck, her arms wrapped tightly around him, their bodies merging together as one. It was an outpouring of emotion, pent-up frustration, and unleashed affection. "Thank you, Michelle," she said as she released her embrace, but then took his hand and pulled him back, leading him inside. "Dance with me again." Michelle opened his eyes tiredly, his head pounding from the booze, loud music, and the light coming through the upstairs window indicating it was late in the day. He groaned and rolled over, trying to figure out how to leave the bed and salvage what was left of daylight. Then he realized getting out of bed would be very difficult and inconvenient. Next to him lay Trisha, without anything from the waist up, her eyes closed, softly snoring, almost purring in her peace. She lay on his arm, sandwiched between the bed and one of her impressively large breasts. Michelle was stunned. "Is it really him?" he thought, scanning the room and seeing traces of hastily discarded clothes, including frilly thong panties that clearly weren't his. He swallowed slightly and reached down with his free hand to lift the sheets slightly. Both of them were completely without clothes, and to make matters worse, he realized Trisha's eyes were open and staring at him. He couldn't continue. How could this happen, he thought. Of course, he was drunk, and the memory of dancing with Trisha awakened passionate emotions in him, but to go from that to bed, to what at night seemed like a forbidden passion, was too much. Is it true? His question was rhetorical. It was all obvious, and his memory finally started working again, recalling moments of unbridled lust and joy, her without clothes, sweaty body writhing with his. She nodded, the expression on her face a mix of happiness, satisfaction, confusion, anger, pain, and guilt. But how could this happen? Why did this happen? We didn't protect ourselves, he said. I know, but I trust you, Michelle, like I don't trust anyone else, she replied, leaning over and kissing him. He tried to pull away, but she persisted with haunting passion and desperate need. Finally, Michelle managed to free his hand with a short, sharp jerk. But no matter how hard he tried to leave her in bed now, he found he could not do it. She was beautiful, alluring, and without anything. He reached out, almost without control over his actions, carefully caressing her body, thighs, buttocks, and breasts. Trisha make a sound. She had barely had a night for the past 12 months, relying more on her hands and numerous toys. Now she was lying in bed with a man close to ideal, and she didn't want this to end. If she was honest with herself, she wasn't going to let this end. She pushed Michelle back onto the bed and ran her tongue and lips over his chest, over his stomach, until she reached the bottom. Afterwards, they had very passionate night. Finally, when her lust was satisfied, she collapsed on top of him, pressing her breasts into his chest. Both were exhausted and satisfied. Oh, God, she said sadly. Trisha, he began, but she kissed him lovingly, silencing him. I wanted you just this once before you went back to Hope, she said. Confusion reigned in Michelle's soul. Uncontrollable and uncomfortable thoughts raced through his head. His lips returned to hers. From the other room, Jason shook his head in disbelief. He had lain awake all night and could not sleep, while they did this several times, for several hours in a row. And now they did it again, this time even more ardent and passionate than before. Jason was sure that whatever the future held for his friend Michelle, he would have to buy a new bed for this room. He was surprised that it was still intact. "Trisha," Eliza's voice was stern, almost accusing. "My cousin was there at the Crown last Friday. Say it's not true, please." Trisha bowed her head. Even though she told Michelle it was a one-time thing before he returned to Hope, they had seen each other twice more, and both times it ended the same way. Both times she said it wouldn't happen again. However, that evening she had to meet him again. My God, desperation was palpable in Eliza's voice. "What's happened?" Kimberly asked, looking from one to the other. "What's happened?" Trisha took a deep breath. She couldn't hide it, couldn't deny it. "I slept with Michelle," she confessed. Silence hung in the air above the table. Eliza, Trisha, and Kimberly gathered for lunch at their favorite diner on Thursday to catch up and talk. They often talked about Hope and Michelle, but now it seemed like they were talking about Trisha and Michelle. The halloumi salad roll no longer seemed appetizing to Trisha. The shame of her action burned her cheeks, and she dropped her lunch back onto the paper plate. "You what?" Eliza exclaimed. "I had an intimate with Michelle." "Okay, I just ran into him, and we slept together." "Only as friends." "Nonsense, Eliza," Trisha hissed. "I thought you were her friend." At that moment, Trisha gained courage. She wasn't going to stand for it. What happened was Hope's fault. This stupid, smug girl. "You know, Hope slept with Glenn and Tony, right?" She threw the words back at her friends. She had a night with two of Michelle's friends at the same time, forced them to play with her because she wanted to know what it was like to have two men at the same time. Hope left Michelle. He's a great guy and deserves better. He doesn't deserve such disrespect. But you are her friend, Eliza. Eliza's harsh words did not match the expression on her face. She was devastated. If news of this reached Hope, it would crush her. Hope has made some mistakes, but she's trying to make things right. She doesn't have an intimate anymore. She remains faithful to Michelle because she loves him and wants him back. And this was the good part. Kimberly couldn't resist. Michelle was handsome and fit, and if Hope was to be believed, especially compared to many she'd have over the last 11 months, he was a fantastic lover. Trisha smiled, but it was the smile of a convict. Better than just good. Who is better? They turned around, shocked. Behind them stood Hope, a box of salad in her hands and a sly grin on her face. "Oh my God," she squealed when she saw Trisha's face. "Who did you sleep with?" "I know him." Silence fell over the group as they all found something else to look at. None of them could look Hope in the eye. None of them could hide their discomfort. Hope's smile faded. "Who did you sleep with this time?" The voice was demanding but sad. "Who did you have, Trisha? Tell me, who?" The silence that followed said all that was needed. "Who is he, Trisha? Tell me now." She was squealing, attracting all the attention of the small restaurant. Tears were streaming down her face. She understood. She saw. She just didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to accept it. These are her friends. They should be on her side. They should help her get back the man she loves. How could they? How could she? Trisha was her best friend, the only friend she trusted more than everyone else. Without warning, Hope threw a box of salad into Trisha's face and attacked her friend with her fists. Hope hit Trisha again and again, screaming like a banshee who had been wronged. Trisha tried to cover herself, tried to protect herself, but the attack was intense, unrelenting, and full of rage and anger. It took 3 more clients, plus Kimberly and Eliza, to pull her away and keep her still. Trisha's face was broken, her lip was cut and bleeding, and her left eye was already showing signs of darkening. "I'm sorry," Hope said as she shook the remaining salad from her hair and left, depressed and dejected. "Did you actually sleep with Glenn and Tony?" Kimberly turned to Hope as soon as Trisha left. She couldn't believe she didn't know about it. Did you really let Michelle's two so-called friends roast you? She shook her head in disgust at Hope and her actions. And you're upset that Trisha and Michelle don't be a hypocrite, Hope. This whole thing, this whole mess, this whole thing is your idea. Everything is on your conscience. Do you remember? She quickly left, running after Trisha. If now, as the end approaches, the sides become clear, then everything will be even worse than it was. They need solidarity. They need honesty. They need to collect their thoughts and not quarrel. Kimberly was going to try and solve this problem. She needed to bring them together and not let it tear them apart. But if the battle lines were drawn, she wouldn't stand by Hope's side. She couldn't. Not now. Are you going back to her? Trisha squeezed Michelle in her arms, his muscular arms gently wrapped around her, holding her close to him. Her left eye was swollen and black, she had numerous other bruises, cuts, and abrasions, and her lip was so swollen that it hurt to even speak. No, Trisha cried. I'm so sorry, Michelle. He shook his head softly and stroked her hair, brushing it away from her beautiful but battered face. I also wish. He kissed her gently on the forehead and held her close to him. They hadn't had a night, and they weren't going to have an intim, not today, not in light of their argument during lunch. Trisha simply needed his warmth and compassion. She knew she shouldn't have made a move towards this man, but in the end, she couldn't help it, especially after Hope told her about Glenn and Tony. Glenn and Tony, Michelle knows. How would he take it? She swallowed hard. She had to tell him that his friends had betrayed him just as she had betrayed Hope. Michelle, she looked up at him and saw his pain. This whole sad state of affairs affected him greatly. He was a good man whose only crime was his love for an obsessed woman. Michelle, I need to tell you something. He nodded for her to continue. Glenn and Tony, she tried to say, but the words got stuck in her throat. Hope, she slept with Glenn and Tony. They had it together. A tear escaped from his eye and ran down his cheek. Thank you, Trisha. Now the strange looks he had received from them in the previous months made sense. He sighed. He couldn't blame them. He was the one who refused to lay down ground rules with Hope. When this whole thing blew up, it was he who refused to discuss the separation. It was his words that came back to him, and it was his words that helped set these events in motion. The only rules are what I said, nothing else worries me, he could still hear them in his mind. I reproduced them. Now, he was angry, full of bile and malice, and did not stop to listen to her, did not stop to discuss with her. He simply threw his demands at her and then left, not caring about the consequences. Thank you, Trisha, he said again. I don't mind. She was free to be with whoever she wanted. No questions, just like I can be with whoever I want, with the one I still want. He looked down at her and smiled. And I want you, Trisha. I want you. It will destroy her, Michelle. She loves you. I love her too, but not like that, not anymore. She will bounce back and hopefully won't make the same mistakes again. I hope she puts it out of her mind and can find someone else. He hugged her tighter. He had known Trisha for many years, loved her deeply but not romantically. However, now, even though they had crossed that line only a few days ago, he knew that the love he felt for her had changed irrevocably. He didn't need to learn to love her, learn to recognize her, he already loved her. Trisha, I love you, he said. She cried hellish tears, her heart ached. So many lives would be touched by this simple statement. Many would be crushed, long-term friendships would be severed, and may never be restored. She picked up her phone and texted Kimberly, replying to an earlier message after the incident at the sandwich shop. I love him. It was the 20th of May, noon. Hope sat quietly, knowing that she had already been judged. The cafe on Brown Street was bustling with activity, people came and went, grabbing snacks, lunch, and coffee. Outside, Eliza and Ella waited with desperate but ultimately meaningless optimism. Kimberly and Trisha abandoned her to her fate. She knew why it burned her. She hadn't spoken to Trisha since she attacked her ex-friend. In addition to her dead friendship with Trisha, she only had casual interactions with Kimberly after it became apparent that the parties were sorted out. Kimberly tried, but it was all in vain. Hope didn't want to listen, and Trisha didn't want to leave Michelle. Hope tenderly turned the wedding ring in her hands, worn on the third finger of her left hand. She had worn it with reverence since Michelle had left it in her apartment after that fateful evening when she had given herself to Ty for no reason, begging him to have her. It was the last reminder of her former life, of the happiness she once had. Time flew by. It was already 12:15, and he still wasn't there. He promised, but he was not there, just like she promised to be only his, but then she wanted more. She cried into her coffee. "Are you okay, honey?" Hope raised her head and looked into the older woman's eyes. She's about 60. There was a gentle, caring, and concerned expression on her face. She shook her head. She's not okay. She's broken. She lost the man she loved and two good friends, perhaps forever, and other consequences reverberated throughout her universe, changing everything and everyone she touched. The older lady sat down without asking or invitation and wrapped her arms around the young woman. "Problems with a man?" she asked. Hope nodded, broken-hearted. Hope nodded again. "Is it your fault or his?" Hope raised her head. She could barely speak. She was enveloped in the warmth of a stranger. This woman shouldn't have done this, wasted her time coming who knows who, but she consoled her. There were even tears in her eyes, reflecting Hope's suffering. "It's my fault," Hope finally managed to say. The older woman sighed but still held her. She hugged her for what seemed like an eternity without saying a word, just holding on to let the comfort and compassion flow into Hope. "Hello, Hope." Both looked up and saw Michelle. He was smartly dressed in a suit and tie, handsome and cordial, his jaw showed stubble, and his hair was impeccably groomed. "Sorry I'm late," he nodded to the older lady, who patted Hope on the back in a gentle, motherly manner. She slowly stood up, and Michelle extended his hand to help her to her feet. She glanced at the two young men and shook her head sadly. What a pity, they look great together, although she sees that the man has left her life and the woman is still grieving. "I wish you luck, Hope," she said as she left. Michelle pointed to the empty seat opposite his former love. Hope nodded again. "Please," her voice was uneven, and she could barely look at him. Her heart and soul were filled with pain beyond anything she thought possible. They sat in silence for some time. Michelle thought about the woman sitting in front of him, about the woman who only 12 months ago seemed to be his life partner. Hope, in turn, tried to avoid his gaze, tried not to look at him, but still, she absent-mindedly twirled Michelle's ring, a dedication to his love now gone, lost. "Are you and Trisha?" She finally succeeded. He nodded. "Are you getting married?" He shrugged. "Maybe they haven't talked about it yet, it's still early." He reached across the table to her and took her hands in his. "It's time to forget me," he said, taking the ring off her finger again. "This is unhealthy," he remarked, holding the ring in his hand. "Not healthy. Give it up. It's broken. I love you, Michelle. Please come back to me." The shake of his head was another nail in her coffin, sealing the fate of a future without him. "No, Hope, you have to accept it and move on. You are a wonderful, wonderful person. We've both made mistakes, there's no reason to let them hold you back. You are young and won't be alone for long." She fell on the table and cried, and he sat and silently looked at her. There was compassion in his eyes and love in his heart, but now everything was different, it belonged to someone else. He stroked her hair gently. "If we had only lived apart for 6 months as I wanted, we would still be together," she whispered, muffling them with her hands, which she wrapped around her head. "Perhaps," he answered stoically and indifferently, "but I would never trust you again, and our relationship would have been doomed anyway." "What about 12 months? She looked up at him pleadingly. "Why 12? He smiled bitterly. "I needed time to sort out my feelings and perhaps move on, to understand what happened to us. 6 months wouldn't be enough. I would still be too hurt by what you did, what you said, what you needed. I needed to be away from you longer so that I could heal or decide to take you back. You always knew we'd end up like this, didn't you?" "No, I didn't know, but I suspected," he stopped and stood up, pocketing the ring he had given her once and then returned angrily. His conviction that leaving her in her hands would be harmful was pure. He didn't want her to be hurt. He didn't want her to dream that they could be together again. This relationship no longer exists. Everything is over between us. The idea of dating other men was entirely yours, Hope. You accepted it unilaterally. Until then, I was happy. Trisha misses you, were his last words, and then he left. A few moments later, her two remaining and loyal friends were at her side, sympathizing and crying with her. Love is lost, her love defeated. Michelle and Trisha's romance continued to soar to new heights, and their former friendship became the foundation on which it was built. But the consequences of this relationship were far-reaching. To her horror, Trisha found herself shunned by both Petra and Lila, and although Kimberly decided to support the two new lovers, that relationship was also strained. Kimberly felt like she was in the middle of it all and couldn't hide her frustration at how everything was falling apart. A week later, when Michelle and his friends gathered at the park to shoot hoops, he ran into Glenn and Tony, while Jason and the others stood behind him. "I heard you guys like a sandwich," he began, getting a confused look from both of them, with Hope stuffing, realizing that the situation had changed and their secret had been revealed. They retreated, Glenn calmly raised his hands, and Tony simply turned and ran away. Michelle, however, no longer cared. He simply laughed at Tony's cowardice, making Jason laugh and a few others laugh too. "Glenn, it's okay, we weren't together then," but he pointed aggressively and intimidatingly at the shorter man. "A real friend would have told me, and you're not a real friend, are you?" Glenn tried to say something, but what was the point? He slept with Hope along with Tony, and nothing could fix that. It was short and sweet. Both guys were satisfied, but Hope wasn't, and soon after she left, frustrated and annoyed, cursing her inability to have a night properly. What could Glenn say at that moment that would matter? "Sorry, Michelle, you're right." Glenn looked at all the other guys' friends who would now worry about him with their partners and realized that they were no longer friends. It was the realization that he had more than just a hot chick. He himself was sorry, really sorry. Then, with his head and shoulders down, he walked in the same direction Tony had run off to. They finished their game mostly in silence. "Today, I have another hot date with Heidi," Jason said enthusiastically after the game. "I'm going to do it. I'm going to ask her for a more serious relationship. I think there's something to it." Michelle hugged him as tightly as he could, repaying the kindness his friend had shown him so many times and so long ago. "You will succeed, Jace. Good luck." Michelle broke up with hot nurse Meredith, who was more than a little upset. He tried to be gentle and did it in person at her home. She thought that the handsome teacher would make an honest woman out of her, but this was not destined to come true. She was shocked that the relationship she had longed for had suddenly turned to ashes. When the conversation didn't go well, Michelle felt terrible and tried to calm her down, but his words meant nothing, his actions were meaningless. Both cried, but her tears were the tears of a wounded woman, and his were the tears of a guilty one. And then, still reeling from what had happened, he visited his parents. "Sorry, Michelle." His mother was heartbroken by the complete collapse of his relationship with Hope and upset that she intervened when he begged them not to interfere. Here's the corrected version. But mothers often think they know best, and Jean certainly thought so at the time. She remembered how happy he was with Hope and desperately wanted her child to be that happy again. She knew that he loved her and she wanted that love to stay with him, to instill in him the joy that she so longed for. However, his father was delighted, especially when Michelle spoke about the relationship he now has with Trisha. "I tried to keep the peace. If you brought Hope back, if you married her, I didn't want there to be any bad blood hanging over us. We had to play both sides and pray that everything would go well, not to mention your mother can be very stubborn sometimes. I'm glad you didn't listen to me. I'm glad you showed strength and listened to your heart and head. You are a smart person, Michelle, smarter than me. It was not instant forgiveness, but family is family, and there is only one, as his grandfather said before his death. He had to fix the bridges before they disappeared forever, and so forgiveness was what he tried to give them, even though it hurt. Only with the help of Trisha was he able to achieve this. Now his parents saw their son happy again, happy that Trisha was next to him. Hope looked at the card in her hands. 8 long, Bitter months had passed since that last terrible meeting in the Brown Street Cafe. She tried to rebuild, tried to restore friendships, but it was slow and painful, full of tears and self-hatred. This beautiful card with the faint scent of lavender set her back, opened up old wounds that she hoped had healed or were close to healing. Now she knew that it would take much longer, require more effort, and bring much more pain and suffering. It is Michelle Corbin and Tricia Stevens' loving wish that you join them in celebrating their upcoming marriage, built on love, honesty, friendship, and trust. She didn't read further. She could not. The invitation was thrown into the trash, and tears welled up in her eyes. What do you think of our second half of the story? I think the second part of the story was more intense than the first, as I expected, with more interesting plot twists. What's your opinion about the second part? Write in the comments. See you in the comments.